everybody. I'm so happy to be here. Really wanted to come last year, and we didn't get the opportunity, but I'm so excited for sharing everything I've learned in this last year, especially about Bitrise and Appetize.io. So I'm going to go over a little bit about what Bitrise is and the benefits to using it, as well as Appetize.io and how you can benefit from that with your React Native applications. So there is obviously some assumption you are familiar with React Native. I think a lot of that here today. It's not super important for what I'm covering right now, but there is that. So a little bit more about me. He shared I ride a Harley. Yeah, I ride a Street Bob. Pretty cool. Obviously, I'm an engineer. I feel like I'm a forever student. I'm also a firefighter, an EMT, a wife. I have these 3 really awesome kids that are really active. I attend the local football games. It's actually a picture of my daughter and I. So just a few things about me. So Bitrise, it's a continuous integration and delivery platform, but they really focus on mobile specific. And that's really helpful in this space. There are other CI/CD platforms that attempt to solve for too many platforms, which make it more complex. It allows also for the automation of your testing and deployment of your app with a really simple interface, which we'll get into in a little bit. So Appetize.io. This allows you to run your native mobile application, Android and iOS, in a web browser. So we've seen a couple examples today with like Expo Snack. I'm trying to think of one of the other ones we saw, but this is just a tool you can use for app demos, training, customer support, development, testing. There's endless opportunities for how you could use this. So my geeky humor. We'll get into the nuts and bolts here. I'm a farm girl. I grew up in the country. Built engines. So we'll go a little bit into just in the slides, and then I'll actually demonstrate in the application. So when you want to put your application in Bitrise, there are some really simple steps. You set your privacy, you connect your repository, whether that's GitLab, GitHub, Bitbucket, etc. You set up the access, private, public. You choose the branch you want to set for that configuration. And then you do some simple validation. When it's doing that validation, it's getting some project-specific information. So in this case, it'll start to see like it's a React Native project. Oh, you have iOS in there. You have Android in there, which will start to build out the baseline configuration in the workflow editor. Once you get through that, it's automatically detecting a lot of the values for you, and you can set an icon, which will help you in your dashboard. So if you have different configurations for your app, one on your development branch, one on your production branch, because again, you can use this to deploy to the App Store, to run your tests, etc. Then you can register webhooks, which allow you to automatically trigger these workflows to happen. With that, it sets off your first build. So let's go ahead and do that. I forget. I'm still a PC girl. I'm definitely not one of those Mac girls. So it's a really simple Hello World React Native app. I pretty much did a React Native init and got a simple React Native application going for this purpose. So here's Bitrise. I already had done a demo, so you can see this is kind of my dashboard. And I'm going to go in and add a new application. So I've already connected my, my private GitHub repository or my GitHub account in Bitrise for this example. So it's already done that portion of it, and you do that when you create the Bitrise account. So I'm going to say, I want this app to be private. Again, next. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm going to keep it on GitHub. It knows my repos. I'm going to select my Hello World. Setting my repository access automatically. I'm like, I don't need any of the private stuff, so auto add. Wants my branch name. So again, this could be, UAT, testing, production, whatever you have. This one only has a master branch. Starting to do that validation. I like how it tells you you might want to take a coffee break. It actually doesn't take too long, but you can see here it's starting to run logs. We can expand it. It's doing its, CLI. We can tail it. So it's running the project scanner right now. You'll start to see it's detected an iOS project. It's detected an Android project. It knows it was React Native. Let it finish this portion. All right. So you can see here, it's like, hey, you have a React Native project. For my Android project, yep, I want it to stay in the Android project directory. My module for that is app. And I can go ahead and, next. I don't have any variants I want to set on here. Then it's asking me a little bit about my iOS project. So I'm going to select my schema here. So again, if you have different schemas. So for an example, on the project that I'm working on, we have one that's for dev, we have one that's for demo, and we have one that's for production. I'm going to do this for development. So this is all the configuration here. And I'm just going to confirm it. I'm going to quickly browse for an icon. Just something fun. Wish we had more sunshine in the last week. I'm a native here. So I'm going to go ahead and proceed. And again, you could have different images that will help you realize in your dashboard which app you're looking at. So if a build's failing, the emails that you get, or however you set up for the communication at the end. So I'm going to go ahead and register that webhook. So as I, commit to my repository, it will actually kick off those builds. So as I was showing in the slides, it's really as simple as that. That's your basic configuration. It did most of it for me. Kind of reminds me of the days of, front page, WYSIWYG editors. So back over here in our dashboard, you can see it's doing its thing. It's running. I can click in there. And the whole time it's running, I can actually, again, look through and follow what it's doing, each step. I can see each step it's doing. If it fails, I see everything as if it was in the terminal. I'm going to flip back over to my presentation here. So, as I said, you can get into now more advanced configurations. So you can set up specific steps for React Native, for iOS, for Android, for adding Appetize, which we'll get into as well. So there's a really simple interface, or you can download the YAML file and start doing your configurations directly in the YAML. So this is what the workflow editor looks like, and I'll actually go in there and show you. There's a ton of options. You can search by categories like, oh, I'm looking for Android specific, I'm looking for the build, I'm looking for the iOS test pieces. So let's flip back over to Chrome here. Oops. And we'll go into the workflow editor. So this is the visual representation of what it's doing. It's activating the SSH key, it's cloning the repository. It has, again, this is really just a skeleton that it's set for you to understand what you can do. Run npm commands, and then it does this deploy to Bitrise, which is taking your artifacts and storing them for that build. back over here, I wanted to show you. So if I wanted to add a step, I can add it anywhere in there. So I just click that plus icon. I can start to have branching logic. And I'm going to say, oh, you can start to see, like, there's Appetize, Android. And I could say, oh, I want it for test. And it starts to give you all these options. You click on it. It adds it where you wanted it. You fill out a couple variables, save it, and you can run it. So I'm going to discard that and show you the YAML file. So this is your source of truth of the visual representation, right, in the YAML format. So I can start to get into exact configurations that I want if I don't want to use that WYSIWYG editor. So I'm going to go ahead and copy my Bitrise YAML I have over here. So one thing to note about the YAML is that if you check it in with your repository, it doesn't actually run that. That's more for your purposes. You have to save it within Bitrise, or it doesn't realize you want it to be different. So I've made that change. So that's just an example of changing the YAML here. And then I can go back to this application and say, hey, kick off my new build. And it will start. So this one takes a little bit longer. So as it's running, I'll get back into the slides over here. So Appetize. As I was talking about, this is a really great tool for doing demonstrations. You know, you want to sell your product. You want to train somebody on it. In our case, we're using it for customer support, so our CSPs can actually have a version of the application and walk the users through different functionality. They can log into it. So for this one, you set up the account on Appetize. They have varying levels. You know, I'm not paid by Appetize by any means. They have, you know, enterprise support or very basic. You would request your API token, which you then need to set into the Bitrise Secrets Manager and use the workflow editor or the Bitrise YAML in order to run those builds with the deployment to Appetize. So get back over here, kind of walk through that piece. So here in the docs, they make it really simple to request the API token. You click this, they email it to you, however you set up your account. In the workflow editor, so this build has now passed for the changes we made. I'm going to go back into the workflow editor and show you the secrets. So in here is where you can add your secrets. So you would add new, and you would name it whatever you want to call it. So in my case, I have it named Bitrise API token. Sorry, the whole mirroring is messing me up. And then you would paste in your value here. You would then be able to run your build once again. I'm going to go ahead and cancel that. I don't have the API token right there, but locally, a really cool thing is they have this available for you. They have a CLI that allows you in your terminal to run the same thing, but it runs much faster. So you can start tweaking your YAML file. Obviously, you don't have the same workflow editor with that WYSIWYG drag and drop, but you can go look at what the steps are, what the configurations are. They actually have really great documentation for all of the various steps. But it allows you to get really quick feedback and debug why a particular step might not be working. So let me go ahead and show you that in terminal. So I have in Visual Studio Code here, this is the workflow we just ran. And I have a couple of the other steps commented out for time. They take a little longer, like Xcode archive. And I'm only going to deploy to iOS. But I do have to set a Bitrise secrets YAML file as well in order to do the Appetize deployment from local. It needs the same setup. And this primary workflow, or the workflow is called primary in this case. That's their default naming convention. I could call it whatever I want. I could call it deployment. I could call it test. You can see here in my setup, so here's primary, and then I have in here deploy, and it has for primary, before it runs, it's doing the setup workflow, and after, it's doing the deploy workflow. So you can start to have that branching logic of like one YAML file if you want that you're working off of, and then running or executing just certain pieces of it. So over here, the command is just Bitrise run, and then the name of the workflow that you want to run. Try and make that a little bigger. So you can start to see again, it's just going through. This looks exactly like what you were seeing in the tailing in the Bitrise dashboard. So it cloned, which doesn't do locally because it knows it's working off of your local branch. So again, this is a way to test changes without going through the actual push to your repository. So now it's actually spinning up the emulator because it's doing the build for iOS, which it will then take those artifacts in order to run the deployment up to Appetize. So it created a zip. It's deployed to Bitrise and Appetize. So now it's letting me know all of the steps that ran, how long they took, and that they passed. So in this final section here, this is kind of the two versions. So over here on the left-hand side of that image, you can see the Android emulator and then an iOS emulator. These are both done in the website, and I'll show you them in just a moment. But you can see there's a lot of different options. I can make it bigger or smaller. I can rotate the screen. I can change which device it's running off of. I can do silly things like change the bezel color. And these are all you can actually embed these in iframes on a website. So if you wanted to have, in your repository, in your documentation, however it is you want, you actually can configure the URL for a frame in order to be able to pass the parameters, the specific parameters you want, without allowing the user to interact with that. So going back, maybe. Sorry. One screen to the other. So I'll go back to my dashboard for this account. And you can see it's uploaded both the iOS and the Android version. So this morning I ran it, and I did the Android version, so you can see it was updated at 6:30 this morning. That was the 6th time that I've done that. And in this other one, it was just ran. That was the 16th time because I've been running this mostly for iOS for speed. And the way I was able to get that to continually update was back actually in that configuration again. If I do not specify in that step the public key, so you'll notice this key actually matches to the key that is right here. And that tells it to update that specific one. If I don't provide that, it will still upload to my account because I've given it that API token, but it will create a new version of your application every time, which there would be some cases where you might want to do that, right? You might want it to upload for a new release candidate or something of that sort. So let's actually take a look at what it looks like. So this is what I just deployed. Like I said, this is a React Native init, so it has all the, tells you to shake it for your dev tools. So when I tap to play, it's installing the app, and that's it. So I wanted to show you, actually, and this is how we're kind of using it at my company. So we have, it knows our icon because it's pulling that again from the application. That wasn't something we specifically configured. You can see this is the iOS version, and then we have our Android version, and it's got some other tagging and various things. Really, that was all I had to share with you. I think both of those tools allow you to give your customers a great experience, whether that's for selling, for training, for support, for debugging, just to see what it looks like in different devices. Those are really quick ways. And then the CI and continuous delivery. Thank you.